Yeah, hello and welcome to episode number 8 of using conceptbase. The topic of today is the built-in data model of conceptbase, which is Telos, developed by Milopoulos and others. The Telos data model has 5 built-in classes, and I'd like to discuss these 5 built-in classes here. To demonstrate that, I use the graph editor that can start up automatically with a given graph file. I will give a link below how to configure the system to do so. So the predefined graph file is here, telos.gel. You can click on that if you have configured that appropriately, like displayed in this file. And you open it, and then the graph pops up, and then you see this figure with the 5 built-in classes. The center one is called proposition. Proposition is standing for any kind of stored information, be it an attribute, be it an instantiation, be it a specialization, or being any other object displayed just by a node. So these are the 4 types of objects. Individual stands for any object that is displayed like a node. This is an instance of proposition itself, so it is an object itself. The green dotted link means it's a derived instantiation. So by nature of the shape of this object, there's a rule that makes it an instance of proposition. The next one is attributes. It stands for any attributes, but also links, relations between objects or propositions. That is a link between any 2 propositions. So it starts from any proposition and it ends in any proposition. Attribute is itself a built-in object. So like individual, it's a built-in object, and it's an instance of proposition itself. The next one is instantiation, or instance of. Any instantiation links 2 objects, so 2 propositions. The source object is defined to be an instance of the target object, being also a proposition. Instance of itself is also an instance of proposition. The next one is specialization, or ISA, that declares one object to be a specialization of another object or subclass of another object. So these are the 3 principles: attribution, instantiation, and specialization. And then we have the individual object itself, and then the proposition, which is kind of the superclass of all these 4 types of objects. So that's the basic data model. Attribute is also an instance of itself. So attribute is an example of an attribute. Instance of that says proposition is an instance of proposition is itself also an instantiation. So an example of itself. Individual is a node-like object, so it is itself an instance of itself. Likewise, the fact that proposition is a specialization of itself is an instant specialization, and that is also an instance of itself. So that is this figure. So now let's make an example of that. So start the text editor. That's here an empty module, so let's remove the comment text here and enter some simple definitions here. So the first one declares employee to be an instance of class. So that has two attributes, name and salary. Class, string, and integer are some predefined objects. So they are not part of the Telos data model, but they are a predefined object. So here we have an individual object, employee, and an instantiation. And then we have two attributions here. Next one is manager is declared as a specialization of employee with an additional attribute here. So that's an example of specialization. And then we have another instantiation, Mary in manager, and then salary and title are instantiated attributes here. So let's tell that and see how that shows up here. So let's display here employee. And if you right click on that and show the derived instantiation, so all instantiations here, it's instance of class, well, that we said that explicitly, but it's also a derived instance of individual and proposition. So anything will be instance of proposition, but here, in particular, it is an instance of individual. It's a derived instance of individual because it's a node-like object. Now that has some attributes or relations. So let's just display the salary here. And this salary is an instance of the attribute here. So it's an instance of the attribute named attribute of proposition. Now employee has some subclasses. Manager, I have to make it a little bit bigger. So manager is declared as a subclass of employee, and this here is an instance of the specialization link here. Yeah, they are displayed as blue thick arrows. Now we declared an instance of manager, that's Mary. So that now has a solid green link that's an explicit instantiation. There's a rule in conceptbase that every instance of a subclass is also an instance of a superclass. So if we show the classes of that, it will be all of them here. So it's an instance of employee because of this inheritance. It's also an instance of individual, and it's an instance of proposition. Now let's look at this instantiation. That is an instance of instantiation of the instance of. So these are all the 5 built-in types, proposition, and its 4 incarnations, attribution, attribute, instance of, individual, and isr. So that concludes this little episode, and yeah, we'll see us next time. Bye.